Hello, people. I'm glad to see you here, and I've been excited for so long about this panel because I think we all are trying to figure out how do we eat ethically in a world that's so complex, intertwined, way beyond our sort of sense of how to do it well. So we need people like you who have ventured out and are doing some things that are really important for us to know about. So I want to thank the panelists, and I want to thank all of you for being here as well. My name's Ellie Stebner, and I hold the Woodsworth chair in the Humanities here at SFU. And one of the things we try to do is to really organize public events that are concerning to people on a practical level, not only on a philosophical or theological or theoretical level. So our panel tonight, I'm going to give them very brief introductions because it's all been online. Starting off will be Brianne Miller, founder of NADA, and a marine biologist by discipline and by training. And NADA, well, she'll tell you more about it. But certainly one of the people that I work with quite closely here at the university swears by NADA. She says it's the best thing she's ever found. It's community, it's no packaging. You can buy as little as you want. And so there's lots of great things. The second person to talk is Dylan Jones. Dylan is the founder and CEO of Coast Protein Inc. Cricket protein bars and powder. And I have asked him to tell us a little bit also, not only about his food philosophy, but about how he got the idea of doing this. And he has agreed to do that. Matt Livingston will speak third. He's from spud.ca, which is a grocery store specializing in organic and local foods. And sustainability, of course. I was intrigued by his bio because he's an avid skateboarder, which really scares me. So there you go. And then Lisa Papania? Good? Okay. Teaches here at SFU's BD School of Business. And you're the founder of Loopy, which is community-focused and zero-waste cafe. And I want to say that all of these people have ventured out into the business world with ideas and with passion. They are locally based, grassroots, but also broader, which is really, really very, very, very interesting because that's the world that we live in. So please welcome our panel, and thank you for coming.
So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know this is a pretty exciting topic for the four of us here. We're definitely really grateful to be taking some time to speak with you tonight. So my name is Brianne, and I am the founder and CEO of NADA. For those of you who haven't been yet, it's a package-free grocery store that's on the northwest corner of Fraser and Broadway, and we opened last June, so we're just coming up onto 1 year of being in business. And our team essentially is on a mission to disrupt the grocery industry and cultivate a better world by inspiring people to change the way that they shop for groceries. So I'm going to kind of share my journey on how I got into ethical consumption or becoming a more conscious consumer and what that looked like. So as a young kid, I was definitely really lucky to grow up spending a lot of time on the ocean, despite growing up in a tiny, rural, very landlocked town in Ontario. Both of my grandparents were stereotypical Canadians, and they ventured down to Florida every year, and my family snuck down every October for 2 or 3 weeks before they got there. So we had a place to stay to ourselves, and both my parents really loved the ocean. My sister and I often complained because my mom would make us walk the beaches for miles on end. But needless to say, it definitely led to me falling in love with the ocean. I ended up going to McGill in Montreal and did a really amazing field course in marine mammal biology. So I went on to study marine mammals for my master's degree, and have been really lucky to live and work and travel in a lot of really amazing places around the world for almost a decade. So I studied everything from coral reefs and tropical fish to marine mammals. Did a really amazing habitat use study on blue whales in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The manatee picture is one of my favorite. I think it was the best job that I had of all time. I was essentially a babysitter for a manatee. It was actually a calf that was rescued because its mom was entangled in fishing nets. Needless to say, I was brought to some really spectacular places around the world, was able to do a lot of diving, spent numerous hours on boats, sometimes for 15 hours at a time, and realized very quickly just how global and widespread the plastic pollution problem is. It became really hard to turn a blind eye to it. There's definitely not a single field site that I've been to that hasn't been touched by plastic. Every single beach that I've been on, no matter how remote it is, whether it's on the far west coast of Haida Gwaii or a 5-hour boat ride from the nearest town, when you see it every day out in those remote places, it really becomes hard to not recognize how big of an issue it is. This is the Ganges River. So this is the bank of the Ganges. You can see just how polluted it is. This is the home of the Ganges River dolphin, which is a now, hopefully not, soon to be extinct river dolphin species. And it's places like this where I was working and traveling where I realized just how lucky we are to live in a developed country where we actually have the infrastructure to deal with a lot of waste like this. So it's countries like India, for example, where they just don't have the infrastructure to deal with it. Their garbage is in their street and in their water, and it's not out of sight, out of mind like it is here. And so it just made me realize how lucky we are and how wonderful a thing it is to actually have the facilities to deal with our consumption, because we don't often see it. We kind of put it in the trash and then it goes away. This is one of my favorite dive sites in the world. It's a small island off the coast of Borneo called Sipadan. It's one of the top 10 dive sites in the world. And it looks like absolute tropical paradise, but when you turn the lens of the camera down, this is what you see. So how many things are in here that you think you might have used in the past week or in the past month? There's definitely quite a few that I've come across in my daily life. So everything from plastic straws to running shoes, wrappers, even whole bananas, tons of plastic packaging, bags. And it was places like this that really kind of opened my eyes to, that link between consumer products and the health of the ocean. And I ultimately made my way to a really interesting job during my master's degree working in northern Quebec for Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And I was working as a marine mammal observer. And so I was this was really far. It was about an hour from the border of Labrador, so really, really far in northern Quebec and the far coast of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And it was essentially my job to sit on this little beach and this dock. And I had about 14 hours to myself a day sometimes, so I listened to a lot of podcasts. It's kind of when I got into entrepreneurship and listening to a lot of stories about how people had started their businesses. But it was sitting here where I actually made the connection between the health of our oceans and our food system. So throughout the previous decade, a lot of the impacts that I was seeing on the species that I studied were either directly or indirectly linked to food. So there are lots of things that we don't necessarily think about, like relying on a global economy to ship food and products around the world, and how that creates ocean noise. That was actually a job that brought me to Vancouver. I was studying the impact of ocean noise on the endangered killer whale population. And, that's an impact of our food system that we don't necessarily think of. And then there's things like agricultural runoff that create pesticides and fertilizers that run into the oceans and create dead zones. And those dead zones are areas where there's no oxygen and animals can't live. And then overfishing, bycatch, and obviously marine debris are a lot of things that are linked directly to food. So it was there on that dock where the idea for Nada came to be. So Nada is, again, a package-free grocery store. We ultimately envision a world that is free of packaging and that there's a food system that just does less harm, there's less waste, and we have less of an impact on the world. So this is what it looks like. So it's about a 2,300 square foot retail space. We've had lots of fun with the design. I'll share a little bit more about how just how we've worked this whole concept of ethical consumption into essentially everything that we do. We are a certified B Corporation as well, along with SPUD, and also 1% for the Planet member, which Coast is also a member as well. Those are both really great organizations. If you don't know much about them, I definitely encourage you to take some time to do a little bit of research. You definitely know with both of them that if you see those logos on companies or products, that they're typically doing a really great job of, kind of managing their supply chains. Those companies typically have some sort of social or environmental good baked into them, so we love working with other B Corps and 1% for the Planet companies ourselves. So NADA is definitely an interesting beast. We're coming at the food system from quite a few different ways. We do that through retail, technology, supply chain innovation, and a big part is community outreach. So the retail store is obvious. We work with hundreds of suppliers. I'll go into a little bit more about our supply chain and how we work with suppliers. But we are a retail store, so we are like a grocery store that doesn't have any packaging. But we do have close to 1,000 SKUs, so the average customer can do about 90% of their typical grocery shop in our store. The technology has been a really fun and exciting piece of what we do. So we've actually developed an in-house system that makes the zero-waste shopping experience faster and more efficient. So we have a digital system that uses smart stickers that allow our customers to automatically track the weight of their containers so that they're not paying for it when they check out. Makes it really simple. You can come in, you can tag your containers the first time, and then you don't need to do it again. And we just automatically subtract the weight when they check out. So it's nice and simple, really fun. It's a really awesome way to get kids engaged. You see families coming in, and I think one of the best things that I see almost every day are older customers teaching new customers how to use the system. And then supply chain innovation, I'm going to leave for now because I'd like to dive in a little bit more into what that looks like for us. And then community outreach as well is really big part of what we do. So along this is my co-founder, Allison. Along the way, we've learned a ton about recycling and how it's not the solution to the waste problem. Both of us were really lucky to take a course in Vancouver that was run by the SPEC program. And we kind of delved into how recycling operates as a commodity. So it's just like trading wheat or oil or grains. Essentially, if there's no market for it, it's not going anywhere. So with plastic specifically, since the production of plastic really started to take off in the 1950s, only 9% of plastic has ever been recycled. So I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that kind of needs to be debunked, is that just because we're putting in the recycling doesn't mean that it's actually getting recycled. So it's places like this. This is actually in Vancouver. This is one of the recycling facilities. When products like this, like paper or plastic, actually build up in the warehouses, if there's no one to buy it and there's no room to store it, it ultimately goes to landfill. So when you actually see that in person and you see these towers of containers and garbage, it really makes you think about, man, how can we actually do something about it? And so this is a big part of what we try to do through NADA and in our personal lives as well. So I'm sure most of you have heard of the 3 R's. Has anyone heard of the 5 R's? A few of you, yeah, awesome. So the 5 R's start refuse and reduce. So those are the biggest things that are really important to me on a personal level. I always try to refuse things that I don't need, reduce my consumption of the things that I do need to use, reuse items that I already have, recycle those that I can't, and rot or compost as a last resort. And this concept of the 5 R's is baked into everything that we've done with NADA. So this is the store quite close to being done construction. We had a really fun time essentially scavenging for secondhand items. So it's something we're really proud of as a business, because you walk into the store and we get lots of really great feedback about how clean it is and how well designed it is. And in reality, almost every single item that's in there is a secondhand item. So all of the fixtures in here were from Sears. We had very serendipitous timing with Sears closing. We scavenged those stores like 10 times in a row. Saved ourselves a lot of money in the process, but we're able to actually salvage and reclaim a ton of fixtures. Even the lights in this picture were all secondhand, so we saved ourselves about $20,000 just by using LED lights from another store, which was really great. And then a lot of the smaller pieces, like a lot of the shelving and tables and stuff, were all from Craigslist. The wood as well is something that's really cool. It's all made out of mattresses and box spring board, so it's all reclaimed pine. This philosophy of kind of reducing and reusing went right down to the actual construction as well. This is one of the walls. We had to take down a wall in the middle of our unit, and normally that's a process where the wall would be deconstructed, the wall would normally be like bulldozed and sent to landfill, but we actually spent the time to deconstruct it, and with the same framing and screws and insulation, we were actually able to rebuild the entire interior structure of our store with that wall. So jumping into a little bit about the innovation that we do in the supply chain. We divert a ton of containers on the consumer side, and that's super important. But a big part of what we actually do is work upstream in the supply chain. So right now we're working with about 300 suppliers, everything from really small one-person businesses to really large distributors and large brands, and then everything in between. And we don't have a set sourcing criteria, and this is really hard to explain and communicate. And the reason for that is that we try to support things like organic growing, but there are a lot of issues with certifications. Not every farm that's growing organically, for example, can get organic certification. So we want to be a little bit flexible in our sourcing. We definitely prioritize working with companies and producers that are growing organically, that are using regenerative farming. Local, of course, when we can. We work with a lot of B Corps and 1% for the Planet companies. We prioritize female-led companies, indigenous-led companies, small businesses. You kind of get the realm. So almost every product that's in that store really does have a story behind it, and a big part of what we're trying to do is support a more just food system. But the overarching criteria that does apply to everyone that we work with is that they must be willing to help us reduce waste in the supply chain in some capacity. So literally every brand that you see in the store is doing something to try and reduce waste. Oftentimes that starts with a reusable container system. So with a good chunk of our suppliers, and every single one that we can where the distance actually facilitates that, we use a returnable container swapping program with our suppliers. So not only are products being sold package-free, they're actually being brought to us package-free. There's a huge amount of waste that's diverted on that front. So this is an example of East Van Roasters filling our jars with cocoa, and we're going through so much coffee now that they're dropping off like huge Rubbermaid totes of coffee every week. And then those totes just get dropped off and picked up with them the next time they drop off the next shipment. The other thing that we really love to prioritize is working with organizations that use recovered products as either raw ingredients or in their own supply chain. So this is Food Mesh, which is one of our suppliers. So they actually recover products. I think, Dylan, you've had ingredients that are on Food Mesh before. So it's companies, it's kind of like a company-to-company platform for food waste. So a company like Dylan's, if they have overstock or something with a product, as a retailer, we can actually purchase it and then sell that to the consumer. So we do lots of cool, quirky things in our supply chain like that, where we are trying to encourage people to purchase recovered ingredients as well. And then one of the most exciting things that we've done in the last few months was actually opened a zero waste cafe within our store as well. And we've actually been able to reduce the waste on the grocery side to essentially next to nothing. We've sent very, very little to compost. Essentially the only things that are being sent to compost are things like peels and pits and things like that that aren't edible. But our cafe team is actually doing a little bit of catering now, and they're able to turn all of this surplus food into what we call daily harvests. So we have things like soups and smoothies that are made every morning with surplus food. We're really lucky to have a really awesome head chef that has really, really, really great skills. So I was actually at the 1% for the Planet Summit in Portland last week, and I was there with our leadership team, and all of us came back really inspired, and I was really excited to see that there was a big conversation around hope spots. And this is something that we've brought back to our team as well. So I was really excited about this because I actually knew about this topic through the marine biology side of things, but essentially hope spots they're typically marine protected areas, but not always. And they are really special areas that show essentially when we remove human pressures from an area, so things like tourism or sunscreen or fishing, that things like reefs and really sensitive areas can actually start to regenerate on their own. And we just had this really amazing conversation about how we can start to tackle these in either small areas at a time, and if we remove those pressures, certain areas do actually have the ability to recover. So that was really exciting, and our team definitely thinks that NADA is a hope spot. So in this whole mess of plastic pollution and climate change, it's organizations like ours that we think really are bringing hope to a lot of people. This is our awesome team of 25. It's amazing how many of them there are. But a big part of what we do is kind of sharing enthusiasm for this movement and really encouraging people to take everyday small actions in their lives that add up. So we do a ton of pop-up shops. This is actually one from the early days that was in Patagonia. It was crazy. We had lineups out the door. I thought they were going to kick us out because we had so many people, which is great. There's just so much excitement around the zero waste movement, and it's something that's really empowering. I think when you realize the ripple effect that a small action can have in terms of swapping a straw, for example. So many people will see a stainless steel straw and say, oh, where did you get that? Or, why are you using that? Or, what's the reason behind that? And it's just those conversations that really tend to spiral out. And we see that every time, and I wish there was a way to quantify it, but it's definitely happening. And that's why we're, kind of getting a lot more momentum around this movement now. This is a really awesome organization that we work with as well. So through 1% for the Planet, we've supported more than 50 grassroots community organizations that are focused on marine conservation, food education, food security, and waste management. So this is Fresh Roots, a really awesome longtime partner of ours. We think it's so important to educate kids about these issues as well, so we kind of do that at every opportunity that we get. And this is a fun use of our space. So you saw that picture before of all the fixtures that we designed. We actually designed every fixture in that space to be mobile. So we're definitely not your typical grocery store. We host so many community events in the space. This is an example of a repair workshop. So we teamed up with Repair Matters, which is a local nonprofit. And actually we have one of these going on Wednesday night in the store. So if you have anything that needs to be fixed, you can bring everything from, I think they're doing textiles and electronics and a couple other things on Wednesday. And then a big part of what we do as well are just getting people out into the community. This is an example of a trail cleanup that we did in Pacific Spirit. We do these every year where we team up and do really large beach and trail cleanups. And this one was actually combined with a package-free snack workshop as well. So we're teaching people how to make snacks that they can bring for the trails and hike and leave without a trace. And this was actually one of my favorite events that we've hosted. This was just last Thursday. We teamed up with UBC's Climate Hub and Climate Guides program to do a talk on climate leadership. And it was just a really exciting thing for us, a really awesome, hopeful, inspiring conversation that took space. So we really, really love bringing community together in any sort of capacity around climate and sustainability and plastic pollution. Our business is definitely proving that businesses that do good in the world can do well financially as well. We are a relatively new business, but we're already breaking even, and we're on track to break more than $1 million in revenue in our first year. And then on top of that, we've also diverted, just this week, we're at about 200,000 containers, so that'll be about $250,000 in the first year. And we have 25,000 members in our online zero waste groups across the country. We've partnered with more than 50 community organizations, and we have sent 0 kilograms of surplus food to the landfill. And just lastly, I want to touch on the individual side of things and how we can all have an impact and what that looks like. This is definitely Allison and I at 3 o'clock in the morning in many instances, because you can imagine what this is like on an individual level, but let alone for your business. Like, how do you deal with something? Where does it get recycled? Or what's the best way to deal with it? But individual actions can be really small. They can be really big. It might start with your grocery shopping. This is an example of one of our customers. A big part of what we're trying to do is make this movement accessible as well. So, you can bring in anything to the store. It doesn't need to be an Instagram pretty mason jar. It could be anything that you have at home. It could be a bag that you're reusing. It could be an old yogurt container or spaghetti sauce jar. Essentially anything that you have that can be used again is a win in our books. And so these are the types of things that we're encouraging people to do, just really simple swaps that you can make in your everyday life. So maybe you have a reusable container that you can use to get a drink or a smoothie in. This was an example. Alison and I were coming back from a conference in California of some things that you could have on a plane, which is one of my favorite tricks, is actually bringing your own container or your own cup when you're on a plane. It's a good way to get a little bit more wine or some more juice. People are really happy to make those swaps for you. And I think if I ever move on from NADA, tackling airplane waste might be my next move. But yeah, lots of really simple things that you can do in your everyday life to kind of make some swaps and reduce packaging waste. And this is one of my favorite ones as well. Is thinking about simple swaps that you can make when you're taking out food. So you would not believe how many times Alison and I have gotten takeout food in our whole team. And we've been really successful with bringing home food in our own containers. This was actually a really great pizza place that was around the corner from where I lived, and they let us take home pizza in our own containers. That being said, my last piece of advice is to not get discouraged. It's definitely really hard to avoid all of this stuff in your everyday life. You just kind of have to roll with it, go with the flow. But definitely realize that it is possible to focus on the small things, and I encourage you all to make really to make one small step at a time. Focus on one thing. You can kind of one of the things that we recommend is doing something called a waste audit. So the next time that you take out your garbage, just spend a few minutes seeing what the largest number of items are that you're throwing out. So maybe it's a napkin, maybe it's a disposable cup, something like that. And then just focus on that one item for the next week or two and see if there's some sort of reusable or sustainable solution that you can make. And then over time, you can continue to add those projects. So that's about it. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you. Super. Always from Nada. I have one thing to say about Brianne, one thing to say about Nada, or maybe three things. We did an accelerator together with SFU Radius 2015-16. And typically she has the best presentation with the most interesting slides, and so that's going to be the same tonight for me. I only have 5 slides, and they're the same slides we've been using for a long time, so you've kept on that track well. And then for Nada, actually inspired Coast. I'll talk a little bit more about challenges as a CPG or a consumer packaged good brand trying to be waste-free or as much waste-free as possible. But what they inspired us to do is 3 things. One is we don't use shrink wrap for our pallets, so we send out pallets of product all over Canada and the US, and we use strapping wrapped in reused corrugated. It does the exact same thing, and it's, I don't even know how much less plastic than the shrink wrap that's typically just thrown in the landfill because it can't be almost always reused. We have a corrugated recycling or reuse actually program with our contract manufacturers. So the people who make our protein bars and the protein powders, we receive and do a lot of pick and pack. So we open up these corrugated boxes and send product all over the North America. We'll send those cases back to our contract manufacturers. They're typically just thrown because corrugated is so cheap. Corrugated cardboard is so cheap that people just typically recycle it and buy it again because it's actually more expensive for us to send it back to our supplier. And our suppliers hate it, but we're starting to work through that. They realizing that it's actually a good thing for them because we've seen them put it on their website. And we've just launched a very similar program, but with grocery stores for our caddy box. So our bars come in boxes of 12. And if they keep the box in good shape, so they don't rip the top off or cut it up or whatever, we'll take them back at our cost. That's works very well with small grocery stores, with gyms, with coffee shops. Has not worked whatsoever with large grocery stores. That's no surprise to me, and probably won't be surprised to anyone who's in the food business, is that with the larger grocery chains, things like that typically take a lot of change to do. So I will talk a little bit about why I got into cricket protein and cricket protein bars and our kind of journey of being a CPG company and the things we're trying to achieve, the things we've been successful with and things we haven't been successful with, which was kind of outweighs them a little bit sometimes. So originally we launched a company that we wanted to change the way people looked at food and ate food. And we actually originally started as a cricket farm. And we quickly realized we had nobody to sell crickets to. So we switched the model within the first year to just focusing on products that would allow people to change the way they look at food, the way they look at insects, and the way they eat the type of food that we want to sell, which is protein bars. And we know, first thing I will say is nobody's changing the world with a protein bar. And the most sustainable and ethical protein bar is no protein bar, and it's real whole food. However, well, we live in a world and a society that doesn't really allow for that people need convenient food, they need fast food, and we wanted to fill that niche. So we always have, from the very, very first pitch, said we're not trying to, be the best. We're not trying to remove the best, most sustainable types of food. We're trying to remove that bottom 10%. So the McDonald's hamburgers, we used to say A&W, but now they have the Beyond Burger, so they're doing pretty good. But the McDonald's hamburgers, they're really, really cheap whey and soy protein products that are just, they have no intention of ever being high quality food or high quality and environmental food. And that's something we focus very high on, is not only the environmental aspect, but the quality of the food that we use. So why crickets, and how did we find out about crickets? I actually ate crickets for the first time in 2007 in Cambodia, just at a roadside, we'd call it a gas station. It was more of a kind of gas and walk station. If anyone's been through Southeast Asia, there's some cool places there that aren't really analogous to what we have here. But a lot of what they had classified as Western food there was terrible. But all the local food was really good, so we ended up eating crickets like popcorn, basically, and we were not only astounded that people ate crickets, but astounded at how well, how good they tasted and how exciting they were when you put little peppers and chilies and things like that. And since then, I've always been, had my mind very open to eating insects, of course. Fast forward, it's like 6-7 years. I had just graduated from UBC. It was Human Geography of Sustainability at the time. It's sustainability, environment and sustainability now. The program's changed a little bit, or a lot. And I was working in the mining industry, which is, when you pick a degree in sustainability and you end up in the mining industry, you quickly realize, what sustainability needs to mean for us to actually have a sustainable society. That being said, the projector, this is projected on, the computer, this bottle, everything we have is mined. And I know by no means I'm a shill for the mining industry, but it made me realize that there had to be kind of two sides, that we couldn't just stop mining. We can't just stop pumping oil. We can't just turn off food, because those are typically about the three worst things for our environment: is food production, energy production, and materials production. But we need all those. So immediately we went into the idea of creating a business that tried to bridge both worlds. Again, we've been very successful in some parts. We've failed very largely in other parts. So a little bit about crickets. They're extremely sustainable. And there's a lot of stats. A lot of these stats are very general, and I'll be the first one to say that oftentimes they won't be 2,000 times less than cows. And you'll hear this stat thrown all around because it's from a report that was made in the UN, a UN report that was made from 2013. I think the most important thing and most exciting thing about edible insects, or even this crazy switch we're seeing to what I call alternative proteins, although they're plant-based proteins, but the vat-grown meats, algae-based proteins, both phyto and zooplankton-based, is that the use of land is so small. You can grow them in urban, suburban environments. The water inputs can typically be recycled, so you don't need virgin water inputs. Feed inputs can be waste, or pre and post-consumer waste. Post-consumer waste is like stuff, leftover foods from a restaurant, where pre is typically like ugly fruit and vegetables. With crickets, for animal feed, those pre and post-consumer waste streams are perfect, and they're used all the time. Brewers' waste is used very commonly. with a company that exists in the valley called Antera that grows worms for fish and chicken feed. However, what we learned with crickets destined for human food is that they have to be very consistent of flavor. And when you have 1 week, you have a lot of leftover bananas, and the next week you have a lot of leftover brewer's waste, it doesn't work. So pre and post consumer waste aren't used in the growth of crickets for human consumption. It's typically right now it's alfalfa, it'll be beans, it'll be corn. We keep trying different things with our supplier to see what we can cut down on water usage and what we can cut down on virgin feed. The one caveat of it is it's all feedstock bean and feedstock corn, so it's not fit for human consumption. The alfalfa is, but the alfalfa has a very small carbon footprint, so there's kind of a balance. But that is one of the first things that we came into kind of a trouble spot with this business model, and the idea of pursuing insects as a more sustainable protein source than traditional whey and soy was, if we have to use virgin feed, why don't we just eat it? And what it came back to us was land, is to switch to an entirely plant-based food source. Traditionally, we don't have enough land, especially in Canada, to grow that many peas and beans and corn and things like that. The balance of the food system goes kind of the other way. So that's the sustainability side. The nutritional side is that crickets, like most edible insects, are incredibly nutritious because they have a very, very short life cycle. And they grow basically to reproduce. It's the only reason they grow. They don't have, our crickets, like many insects, don't have a true nervous system. They have a very simple nervous system. They don't have things like pain receptors or nociceptors. They do have a prey response, so if you flick on lights, they'll kind of scatter, but they don't have an evolutionary advantage to actually feeling pain. It's one of those things, if you're a very sadistic kid and you pull 3 legs off or 2 legs off an ant, it would run around. If you pulled 3, it would die. It's basically life or death. So because of that, we have a fantastic amino acid profile. They're very, very high in B12, very high in iron, and very high in magnesium. So when we use them as a food ingredient in food, and we always say that about Coast Protein, especially with the bars that we started with, is that our bars are fruit and seed and nut bars that we add insects to make it a very high quality food product that can be replicated with plant protein sources. And I'm a huge believer in a balance between plant and insect. We in fact use pumpkin seed protein and hemp seed protein in our protein powders and in our protein bars. It's a balance of cost, but it's also a balance of the products and amount of crickets we're using. Our conundrum that we're currently in is that our core market, our core demographic are millennials. So millennials is a huge demographic. We can talk about segmenting it down and using psychographics to actually pinpoint who we sell to. But this is this type of stat is taken directly from our analytics. I think I spelled millennials wrong actually now I look at that. I think there's 2 N's. But the problem that we're finding right now is that our biggest consumer market, our biggest customer market, is driving demand for more convenient food. So how do we be a more ethical company, a more sustainable company, when we've had to switch from recyclable packaging to PET packaging, this all our packaging now is all PET, PPT, which is a tri-layered sealable barrier. And the reason we've had to switch to that is because as we've entered into the conventional food stream, in order to bring more sustainable products to more people, is that it takes longer for our products to get to market. So typically if our product is made on January 1st, it won't be in conventional grocery until about April 1st. And people won't be eating it from then, and then the shelf life will be about a year. So how do you make food last on the shelf for a year if you're not in this type of packaging? Nobody knows yet. Even the biggest grocery and biggest food companies in the world are still trying to figure this out. So we get this very strange dichotomous response from our customers when we do surveys is we want better quality, we want more sustainable, we want more ethical, but we want it cheaper and faster. And we have not figured that out, and it's actually come to the point where we don't really know how to take coast into the future. The cost of edible insects is very, very high, which is, is kind of backwards to where it should be. But because compared to soy and beans and corn and whey and conventional meats, the market's just so small. So we have to stay high priced, but we can't balance that with the people who want insects in a very low cost. And I know it sounds like I'm complaining a lot, but what it comes back to is our mission. We want to normalize alternative protein sources, so not just insects. We want to normalize the idea that you don't need to eat steak 3 times a day, or at least beef 3 times a day. And I'm sure for many people in the room listening today, that's kind of a no-brainer. But when you go to places outside of Vancouver, typically more conservative food areas like the prairies, Toronto. Toronto's not a overly friendly to this idea. It's actually been very difficult, the Ontario market, whereas like Quebec, California, New York, and Vancouver have been really excited. When you go to those places, people just don't want to eat this type of food, and they say, why would I eat that when I can eat chicken, pork, and beef? So we have to look at how to educate on our packaging, on our products, and our food system. I guess like for me at this point, I don't want to be too doom and gloom because things have grown very well for us, but it's a question that I go through every day, is that do we want to be in Superstore? Because in Superstore and Costco, we can't, at this point you can't say, my pallet is coming in and you have to hand, nothing's in corrugated and nothing's plastic wrapped. They just say, we have no interest in carrying you. And if you send our old packaging, the recyclable packaging, they take one look at it and go, this is not food safe. Where it is food safe, but it's not shelf stable long enough for their food system. So it's that idea of how do we change that? One interesting thing that I'm still a little not entirely sure how to think about is that in the last, I think it was 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks now, Cliff Bar's, the CEO of Cliff Bar sent an open letter to the CEO of Kind Bar saying, why aren't we both organic? And kind of challenging them. But if you look at the ingredients of a Cliff Bar, it's processed sugar, processed protein sources, processed fillers, added supplements. It's not really food. It's a food-like product. So is it really good to be organic, like 100% organic food product, or is it better to be a conventional food? There's a lot of questions like that come up as our brands developed. And actually, way back when you were zero waste grocery, and we were still hand making bars, we used to provide nata with bars. But as we got bigger, it was harder and harder for us to do that constantly, and we actually had to end that relationship because the facility that makes the bars wouldn't let us take product out that wasn't wrapped. Because if we took what they consider waste, which is 10% of every batch made, took that 10%, took that waste, gave it to someone, they got sick, it's the manufacturer's fault. Or could be construed legally as their fault. So it became this idea of we're trying to change the way people eat, but we're becoming more conventional in the way we do it. So how do we break out of that? We've been successful in some places working with small markets, small grocery. Like I've said, with some of our give back processes and our give back programs. But what it really comes down to is education. So we do an enormous amount of demoing. We're like every grocery store, every weekend demoing. My entire team just constantly demos. And the part of that demo is not so much to educate on our products, while it is, it's also to get more feedback and try to get more people thinking about how do you eat a convenient product without being totally unsustainable or unethical. We've got a lot of great feedback, and we're launching some products this year, 2 new product lines that try to tackle that. And we're currently working on some new packaging. So we found We actually created a consortium with 2 of our packaging suppliers. We don't know where it'll go, but to figure out how to actually make packaging that is less energy intensive to make, has just as good as a food seal barrier, and uses, right now it's 50% reused materials, but we hope to have that 100%. So I get this question all the time. People say, why don't you use compostable packaging? And it's a great question. If you go to Smack, which is that healthy fast food just down the street on Granville, there's a few of them. They have all compostable packaging. There's a few bars, few CPG products that have compostable packaging. The problem with that, and I've spent like the 3 a.m. How do you make compostable packaging? Right now, it doesn't exist, and anyone who says it does they're wrong. What happens is you have compostable packaging in a product like ours. It'll have on the back, it'll say compostable only in the proper facility. Well, in Vancouver, that facility doesn't exist. So they would have to send a single bar packaging. The closest one is in the States, so then it has to be exported or to Ontario. But the biggest problem is that nobody is stopping to look at a protein bar to see if it's compostable or not. So what typically happens, especially when it's thrown just because it's convenient, it's thrown in municipal waste, it's thrown in your waste basket at home. But if you threw that in your green bin, and we actually worked with the City of Vancouver and the City of New Westminster, at their composting facilities, it's essentially just a conveyor belt of waste. And there's one guy standing there with a snow shovel. And if he sees anything that's contaminated, so a plastic fork, aluminum can, a Coast protein bar, wrapper, he just scoops the whole thing up, puts it in a bin behind him, and that's taken to the landfill. There's nobody sitting there checking that downstream feed of how do we remove that, because there's no economics behind it. So for us, that's why we're looking at using reused materials, using less packaging, trying to follow the 5 R's as best we can, but it's also really rethinking what's a better delivery for the products. Maybe bulk's a better way, and we try to take things off the shelf. However, someone else will make a bar. So we haven't quite figured that one out. I think one takeaway for me is that there is a lot of companies like me, and there's a lot, or ours, excuse me, and there's a lot of people trying to figure this out. Some of the biggest packaging companies in the world are trying to figure this out. So it's definitely not a doom or gloom, but it's one of those things that we need, there needs to be more funding, there needs to be more people working in it, more minds, more government support in order to achieve, convenient products that are sustainable and ethical. And it's something that, we work on every single day, but it is quite hard to achieve. That being said, I hope the next few product lines we launch in the next 6 months to 18 months will come closer to that achievement, and we're very proud of what we're trying to do, or we are doing what we're trying to do. So I hope you guys look forward to it as well. Thank you.
All right, hello, I'm Matt. I'm the sustainability lead for spud.ca. For those of you who don't know, we are Spud and Be Fresh. We are kind of one unit. We're also Blush Lane in Calgary as well, but we're an online grocery store. And technically, we're what's called an omni-channel grocery store because we also have retail cafes. So the concept is essentially local and organic food delivered to your home, but we also have a subset of retail stores where you can get your Spud order delivered to, stop by, grab a coffee, pick up your Spud order. So we're essentially trying to be all of those avenues for sort of new age grocery. And sort of what I want to talk about today is sort of our version of ethical consumption and kind of what that looks like for us as a brand. But I do think there is kind of a lot of crossover in terms of what we're doing as a brand is also important for consumers to do as well. So the first area we're really trying to tackle is buy with purpose, which I guess is really the whole point of this event, really. So for us, that really means focusing on local and organic foods. What Brianne touched on, we're not religiously organic. There is a lot of subtlety to the organic certification. There's a lot of these big monocrop certified organic produce that's coming out of California. We do carry some of that just based on consumer demand, and people want certain things when they're not in season. But overall, that concept that organic is innately good. It does not always hold up, so we don't want to really be super rigid in that. So we try to source local first to minimize the distance traveled, and we'll also work with local farms who maybe aren't certified or are working towards certification because it is expensive. So we didn't want to sort of just have that off the board completely. The other thing we do as more of a rigid purchasing policy is we have a banned ingredients list. It freaks people out a little, I think, when we first say that to them, but everything on that list is like those pure chemical additives like yellow 6 or red 5. Like, I don't think there's anybody in this room or outside this room who would read some of those chemical ingredients and be like, I want that still. So they're pretty safe to avoid, and it kind of avoids that subtlety of like, is this certification good, essentially. And then further down the line, one of the things we like to do is try and support small companies, so startups. So a lot of the stuff that we sell on the Spud website is small local companies. And it's kind of a cool thing that we get to work with these little companies who maybe are only at farmers markets to start, and they have people who come there from wherever and they say, where can I get your items? And they have no way to get them. So we can sort of step in and help them almost as like a distributor when you're starting up to help expand your business and get your good products out to more people, which is really what we're trying to do. The next slide we're working on is fighting food waste. So as many of you probably know, food waste is a huge impact to climate change. Food that goes into the landfill produces methane, which is 7 times worse than traditional greenhouse gases. So it's something really important to tackle. At Spud, we're really trying to work on food waste prevention, not food waste reduction. So we're really trying to figure out how we can stop food from going to waste in the first place. One of the ways we do that is we sell, we call them fresh daily items, but really they're local companies that are producing something that's fresh, like a baguette or something like that, so a bakery. And what we'll do is we'll take pre-orders for those products through the website, and then we order them on an as-needed basis. So essentially, we order 15 breads that customers ordered, and we send that PO directly to the bakery. They bake it, they send it to us the next morning. So you're essentially getting a fresh baked item into your home delivered. The reason that that is good is we don't have to guess at how many breads we should order, so we don't wind up with that leftover stuff that's going to get marked down to 50% and put on a rack somewhere to go stale. It means that food is fresh when people want it. The other thing we do is we try to compost as much as possible. Much like what Brianne was saying, is compost is not really a great thing. It's better than it going into the landfill or something like that, but if you can prevent it from going in there in general. One really cool partnership we have in Calgary is we're actually working with a biodynamic farm, and they come and pick up all the compost and they take it, and the pigs actually wind up eating all of that, which in the hierarchy of compost, it's supposed to be like people is first, and then it's animals, and then it's actually compost. So if you can get animals to eat the compost, it's a better solution than sending it off to become soil or whatever it may be. And another thing I'm really excited about that just launched, we haven't really done any publicity yet, is we have food waste tracking scales now in our Calgary locations, and they're essentially iPad with a screen there, and then it's a scale that tears itself, and essentially every time we dump something in there, you log what it is, and then it puts a financial value on it, which is handy for obviously running a business, but also gives us like the water impact, and it takes a photo of it, so we can sort of go back and look at those and say, was that cauliflower that went into the compost, was it something that actually went into the should have gone into the compost, or was it something we could sort of pull out and get to a commissary kitchen and turn into cauliflower rice and sell it? But it is kind of tricky to have solid data around food waste, and I know sort of publicly there's kind of a big debate about where is it consumers who are wasting tons of food in their fridge, is it us as grocery stores, is it farmers? It's likely all three, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of great, really solid data sets around it. So one thing we're really trying to do is make sure that anything we say about food waste is truly backed up with data, because until you understand what's happening and where things are going, it's hard to sort of affect any change on it. The last thing we're sort of doing on this is selling imperfect produce. So we do sell I think it's like 6 different types right now, but essentially anything that's ugly but still good. So potatoes, apples, we do bananas as well, and we sell it at a reduced rate, so you can still get it. And that's as much about the awareness that this food is fine as it is about actually selling the items. Another place we're working is responsible transport. So obviously vehicles on the road have a big impact, and everybody driving to the grocery store 2 or 3 times a week has a big impact as well. So sort of one of the key areas that Spud's really working on is we route every neighborhood for delivery by postal code. So when you sign up for Spud, you're not saying, I want this delivery on Thursday. We're saying you live here and we're going to be in your area on Thursday, and what that allows us to do is maximize the delivery density. So when we're coming to your neighborhood, we're doing every one of your neighbors on every street around there, and so the more stops we get in one truck in one day, the fuel efficiency just goes up through the roof. And that's kind of in opposite to sort of this whole 2-day shipping culture where that type of routing for deliveries is actually super bad for the environment, and it's bad for packaging as well. But essentially really digging in and trying to make an impact in the transport side. And that also crosses over into the local, supporting local as well, just trying to think about how goods are getting to us and whether it's responsibly transported. And we have a lot of partnerships that are sort of, we're out in Langley somewhere doing deliveries, and we may have a farm there, so when that truck's empty, we're gonna make sure that it's full on its way back to the warehouse. So just trying to make sure that our trucks are always being used if they're turned on. And that sort of brings me to my next point, which we're in a unique position at Spud where we visit many of the same homes each week. So it allows us to use the technical term is reverse logistics, but essentially we're just at the same homes every week. So we have this unique position where we can actually get our packaging back, which I don't know of many companies that kind of are in that position. And that allows us to do some cool things as far as the packaging take back. The next pillar is reimagine packaging, which I'm sure you guys know quite a bit about. But that's sort of where we're trying to start at, is not so much at the reduce. We're trying to rethink the actual process of, can we just get the packaging out of this scenario in general? So the first thing we've done at Spud is we deliver in reusable Rubbermaid bins. Pretty much every other online grocery company still delivers in actual plastic bags. You'd have to call them to specify not to have it. They'll also use single-use styrofoam coolers and single-use gel packs and just a lot of horrendous things for the environment. So we use reusable gel packs, reusable freezer bags, and then we deliver in the Rubbermaid bins. And one thing we've been trying to work on is essentially taking that concept further and getting it down into the items that we're working on. So one thing that we tried to launch that we're still trying to launch but haven't quite figured out is we did a test for reusable produce bags. So we do have some items that do need to be bagged in order to go into a bin in a food safe way. So we were trying to figure out how can we do this without just using bags. So the idea came up to use those reusable mesh bags, and we launched a test with it. Really exciting. Everyone told me you'll never get a single bag back, people will keep them. In reality, we got a shocking amount of the bags back. It was like 80% or something of the bags actually wound up coming back. The real hang-up was that if you put onions or something in it, the onion peels fall into the bag, and then they come back with the onion peels. So when you think about that across several thousand deliveries a day, it's a lot of someone sitting there and flipping inside out bags and things. So we haven't quite operationally figured it out. But we're always, it sort of falls into this reimagine. We're always trying to do something that stepped out of the box a little. So we kind of learned a bit from that, and we're still looking at ways to solve it. But we did find that we could do the same thing with reusable containers for meals. So we're about to launch another pilot test essentially for delivering pre-made meals in reusable containers where customers could eat them, put them back in the bin, we'll pick it up, we'll wash it, and we'll use it again. And this sort of is what we're excited about because it falls under what you're saying of it's very hard to do healthy, convenient, and zero or low waste. And we feel like that kind of concept is where it really does come together because it is a pre-made meal, it is ready for you to eat, but it doesn't have all the packaging waste. So we're trying to rethink sort of that overall concept of it all. And so, yeah, we're planning to do more in that. And we actually launched just recently a take-back program for the stand-up pouches that they're talking about. So in food service, as he was saying, it's these multi-layer laminates. They have really great shelf life. They do take less resources to make. They're less plastic, so it's less inputs into it. However, they aren't at the end of the day recyclable. But again, to touch on what Brianne was saying, almost everything is recyclable. It's the question of, is the commodity worth it at the end? And so with these bags, the commodity that you get at the end is not actually worth it. So recyclers don't go down that line because they know they're going to lose money on it. So we work with a company called TerraCycle, who essentially you pay them a fee and they'll do the extra legwork to recycle things. So we're now doing that with our own packaging. And what Phase 2 essentially will be to offer this to other partners, because we are in the unique position where if you bought a Cricut product through Spud, we might actually be able to tell a customer to put that in their bin, have them do it, and then we get that packaging back and we send it to TerraCycle. And that's essentially where brands are able, they have a little bit more money to sort of play with in that area. And if the brand is ethical and sort of is willing to do the right thing, it's easier to sort of take that brand's money, connect it to the fact that we're getting the recycling, and then in turn give that to the recycler. So we can sort of take some of these products that traditionally would not be a good commodity in recycling and kind of put the money behind them to make them valuable. So that's one thing I'm really excited about. And hopefully we can sort of serve a need for the community in that way of sort of acting like a secondary recycling service, just because we are able to get packaging back. Lastly is just community. So we try to focus a lot on community events, as Brianne does, but also we do fundraising. So very much like how schools would do chocolate bar sales or something like that, we're trying to do the same thing with local and organic produce boxes. So parents can actually buy a produce box that feeds their family healthy food, and then we give a kickback to the school based on that rather than all these sugary type of things. It's going really well because parents also love that, because it's grocery, they're spending grocery money, they're not buying a box of caramels or something like that. So it sort of works out that way. And then lastly here, I just want to put up some of the certifications. We are a certified B Corp as well, like Brianne said. That one's sort of near and dear to my heart, but it's essentially an overall certification for a business. So it's really an audit that we all voluntarily go through that's run through a third party. And essentially they ask us all these tough questions. They continually make it tougher as well. And you have to submit answers to their questions, but then they'll also, every 2 years, they'll come and do an audit of what you said. So they're essentially anti-greenwashing. So when you see the B Corp logo, you can know that someone's gone through a really intense assessment and been fact-checked on everything they've put in there. So it's a really solid one to sort of stand behind. And then I also just wanted to highlight our transitional almonds. So this is kind of falling into that organic's not necessarily the best. So there is a new certification called transitional, and it's essentially a farmer who is not organic, who's stated goals that they would like to become organic. However, I think it's 3 years you have to get soil samples done before you can get that certification. So when there's now, I forget the organization that does it, but you can get essentially certified as a transitional farmer. And so we're trying to go out of our way to find those products to support people who are trying to make a transition to something that's better. And that's just one thing that's sort of important and kind of falls into this whole ethical consumption, is you can make differences by what you buy. And just sort of in closing, I would also like to say, it's not just about what you buy, it's letting companies know why you're buying it as well. Because we can go look at spreadsheets all day long that someone bought this product, but it doesn't really give us an indicator of why they bought it and what they're passionate about. And it's easier for me, as somebody who represents sustainability inside a larger organization, to sort of point to those type of feedback and that kind of information and say, like, our customers do want this. And I think it's those kind of productive emails or phone calls from customers that say, hey, I'm passionate about this, that really allow me or anyone in any organization to sort of pass that up the line and then see real change. So I definitely encourage people to speak out, and maybe not so much in a negative way, but in a just like encouraging, positive, if you did this, I would be happy to buy more stuff from you. Those type of things really can help brands internally make a difference. So that's what I'll close with.
So I said to Ellie that, I do this for a living, so you could hope you'll have no plans until 10:15. Okay. So thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Megan, for inviting me to be here today. So I have the privilege of being able of running an organization that is purely 100% self-funded. We operate basically as a charity, which means that most of the stuff that we do, we give away, and we mostly give away stuff to the community. We feed them for free, or the people that we work with are values aligned, and so we subsidize most of the stuff that we do heavily. So I get to stand on a soapbox because I don't have to appease any investors, and I like it that way. Also, I'm here, and I'm assuming that one of the reasons that I'm here is to be able to kind of stand on that soapbox. I teach in the BD School of Business, and so I'm told that I should not let my values or my philosophies or any of the things that I spend all my money on kind of interfere with my teaching business, which I don't really do. I don't really listen. But having said that, I spend a lot of my time trying to talk to students, not talking to students, trying to get students to kind of figure stuff out for themselves, and they don't get very far in a 13-week semester. And I'm assuming that I'm here, so I don't have to lead you through that. I'm assuming that you're all here and you're there already with me on the soapbox, and I can move on from that. So I've stolen all of these slides. They're all somebody else's slides, and I actually haven't read anything that's on those slides, so I don't know what that is. That's from Oxfam. And they're not, I wouldn't spend any time reading them. They're prompts for me to know that I'm supposed to talk about something else. When I click the arrow button, when I run out of something to say, now I know what to talk about. So I'm here to talk about the fact that the food system is broken. I'll get to looping what we do later, and maybe if there are any questions, but the food system is broken. The food system, and there's absolutely nothing fixed about the food system in the West. In North America, Western Europe, there is absolutely nothing okay at the moment with what we eat. And the reason that Loopy and I specifically play in the space of food. Somebody told me once at a City Studio event, they said, "Oh, you're the food waste person." I'm like, "Oh my God, that's a horrible epitaph." I can just imagine, I'm not the food waste person. I teach innovation and entrepreneurship. I do not teach about food waste. But that's what I spend most of my life doing. But I see food as a proxy for everything that we do. I mean, food is something that we consume all of the time. It's the thing that we create, that we relate to most often in our daily lives. And so if I wanted to find one place where I felt that I could actually change something, there were 100 things. And when I teach with regard to wood waste and fabric waste and food waste and all sorts of other waste. So, but the thing that I'm Jewish, so I cook, but and also it's just something that some people are engaged in more than 3 times a day, and if you're going to make an impact, talking about food waste is interesting, and it touches people, and it's also very value laden, and so there's a whole bunch of stuff to get into there. But every single part of the food system, the food chain is broken, and every single part of actually every system, every consumption-based system, and I'll get to that. I'll talk a lot about that in the West is broken. And I teach innovation and entrepreneurship, and broken systems and anything that's broken is usually an opportunity, an exciting opportunity due to entrepreneurship. So if you know that there's a problem, in fact, you should never, ever, ever do anything if there's no problem. And part of the problem of the world right now is that we do stuff for no reason. And most of the reason that Facebook exists and all of these companies that actually add no value is because we're doing stuff that doesn't fix anything. It just breaks other things. But when you do entrepreneurship, you should be fixing a problem, and there are lots and lots and lots of problems. So theoretically, I should be really excited that the food system is so broken and our consumption system is so broken, because it gives us so many opportunities to create new things. But when I did this and I started to look at all of the things that are around and all of the systems that we have that are broken, I wasn't encouraged. I was horrified. And this isn't new. For the last, well, since the beginning of man deciding that they needed to own stuff and dominate and take things for themselves, but then more recently, especially since the 1990s, when we started to have globalization, the World Trade Organization, we started to say, well, what we needed to do was consume. We've been putting out a lot of statistics. I'm not going to cite any of them here about all of the damage that we've done. I mean, like how many tons of fabric waste. I think there are like 60 pounds of textile waste that we throw away, that every person throws away every month, or something absurd. How many tons of food waste that we throw away every single day. If you look at how many pieces of plastic on the ocean, I think we had the original expectation that by 2050 there would be more plastic in the ocean than fish. I think we've already exceeded that in many places in the world. And so I'm not going to give you the statistics. The statistics are there, and they've been there since 1962, Rachel Carson, Silent Spring. But they've been emerging, and they've been hitting us. And what's confusing to me is not the statistics, it's the fact that here in 2020 almost, people are still surprised by those statistics. That we go like, really? I didn't know that was happening, but where the hell have you been? Like, what are you reading if you don't know that these things are happening? Like, it's absurd how broken our systems are. But we're going back to food and how broken the food system is. We don't eat food. That's not food. Like, if you had a look at any of the ingredients of that, most of it is not food. And even if you think that it's food-based, the things that we're growing are not actually food. They're not natural. They're grown without natural ingredients. They're grown in manufactured ways. And it's like, it's surprising to me. I talk to kids from the ages of 6 and then to adults. And when you talk to them, you say, like, what happens if you put something other than gasoline, and I'm completely against gasoline cars, what happens if you put something else other than gasoline in a car? And it's a no-brainer. It doesn't work. Not only does it not work, but it breaks. It probably breaks your car and you can't use it again. If you stick diesel in a gasoline engine, weird things happen. You can never use that. You have to like wash out the engine and all sorts of stuff. But we put this in our bodies, and then we wonder why we're getting cancer and heart disease and hypertension and all of these kinds of things. You go, but so this is a problem, but it's a problem of corporations who are now paying government so much in subsidies and for lobbying that we keep letting this happen. India and communities in India have lobbied against their government to get consumer goods, Frito-Lays and Coca-Cola and soda pop and junk food out of school zones, the same way we did with weed. When they were still allowed weed, which is crazy. But in India, they actually went and said, get this crap out of our school districts because our children are getting sick. And then the government said, no, we need money. But this is what we were allowing, and then we wonder why everything is just so broken. And part of it comes from, we're delusional. We actually don't even understand. Either we think that is good, and either we think that that's what farms look like, or, which is even worse, that we think that that's a good farm. So we don't know anymore how damaging it is to have monocrops that completely destroy biodiversity and get rid of all of the stuff that actually allows crops to flourish and thrive. That we need cross-pollination, that we need intercropping, but we need smaller plots with more farms, with more farmers that are interdependent, and that this is not an okay scenario for us to be growing anything. The amount of water that needs to be able to be provided for something like that to happen, the amount of pesticides in order for that amount of anything to be able to grow, the amount of fertilizer, and then the waste and all of that's allowed. Like the fact that we even think that looks like a cool farm is part of the problem. And then we got to the stage where we actually just don't know how to cook. And I know how this happened, and I'm all for women's emancipation. And one of the biggest things that I fight for is women, female equality, women equality, decolonization, all of these things, absolutely. But when women got out of the kitchen, everything fell apart. We didn't want to cook because it wasn't valued by men, and men didn't want to cook because that was something that women did, and we didn't value women. But when that happened, everything started to fall apart, and then people started to go to the people who would cook. And the people who would cook were the restaurants and the fast food places, and we've forgotten what it actually means to cook, how much skill is involved, how much planning is involved. And so every single piece of the food system, including how we value and how we think about and how we arrange our communities and our lives around food, is broken. And a lot of it really came around the 1950s. Post the war, I mean, again, this has obviously been going on for decades and centuries if you want to go back to colonization. But post-war, something happened. Everybody came back from the war. We wanted to get economies running again, and people went into the factories and started to work. And in order for the economies in the West to start going again, you needed to pay people a small amount of money because you needed to employ a whole bunch of people, and you needed them to be able to buy stuff. So what you wanted them to do is you wanted them to be able to buy small amounts, which would then feed the economic machine, and then they would make more stuff, and through that whole economic engine, buying small things with a small amount of money would kickstart the economic engine. And then we forgot that making crappy stuff and selling it for cheap was just something to get the economic engine going. Instead, what happened was those people who wanted to show that they had stuff, that they succeeded, they'd have more stuff. And so in the 1970s, the 1980s, we became this generation, this society that prioritized and pursued the accumulation of stuff. And more than that, we expected and demanded it to be produced for no price. Now, that's not possible. It's just not possible. You cannot produce something for no cost. It's just not possible. And for anybody who started a business, because I think that we just haven't thought about this. So anybody who's started a business, you don't make money the instant you decide, I'm going to start a business, and people just throw money at you. You get investment, or you take money, you take loans, whatever it is. You sell your kid, whatever. You get money, and a lot of it. And so your first product, your first season or whatever it is of producing, and depends what you're producing. Sometimes it's 7 years. Apples take 7 years to actually bear fruit. You spend a lot of time cultivating that before you've made a cent, before you've produced a single thing. And we expect people to spend all of that money and have all of this production and then sell it for no price. In fact, we demand it. Again, this is something that Walmart started. It was horrifying. This everyday low price issue, this thing that we've become accustomed to. And not only have we become accustomed to it, but we now demand it. Everyday low prices. Now, it only works in an economic sense when you have a whole bunch of people in the market. It's not like I'm going to go to you and say, please, can you make me the cheapest tomatoes you possibly can? And you go, cool, I'll make them as cheap as I can. No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to buy the cheapest tomatoes of all of you people. You weren't planning on making tomatoes, but the only thing now is you're all going to try to produce the cheapest tomatoes. If you make the cheapest tomatoes, you're going to use the best land, right? If you're going to make the cheapest tomatoes, you're going to put the best fertilizers on there, right? You're going to use the best seeds. You're going to pay your people top dollar, right? Right? No. Right? And at the end of the day, you're going to make, the only way economies of scale work is that you are going to make a lot, because you know that these people, whatever they're going to buy, they're not going to buy all of your stuff. They're going to buy the prettiest, and they're going to all of you, and they're going to say, I want you to be better than you, and I want you to be better than you. I'm going to take your prettiest, cheapest crap that you've produced. And so the only way that you can recoup this huge amount of investment is start bundling things, because you've produced this enormous amount of stock, and now you have to try to recoup the cost that you've been spending however many years producing, right? So you bundle it, 4 for the price of 6. 5 for the price of 6, 6 for the price of 4, 10 for the price of 6, whatever it is. Not because this is a deal, but you're trying to recoup your costs. And we as consumers, we go out there and we go like, yay, I don't need 6 tomatoes. Who needs 6 tomatoes? I need 1 tomato. But I can get 6 for the price of 4, and I need that deal. And then we go out and we do that with everything that we do. Everything that we do. We go and you try to find the best deal. the thing that you're screwing somebody the most. I'm going to find the thing that I get the most of and have to pay the least money for. And it really is very distressing. When it comes to the food, one of the biggest problems is we're so okay with this because we don't know. Again, I stole this from somebody. I think I stole this from Johns Hopkins. We don't know how food is produced anymore. We're sitting right at the bottom over there. And right at the top over there is how it's produced. We don't know who's producing it. We don't know how they're producing it. It goes through all of those steps. Karl Marx spoke about this, about how we would stop functioning as a society when we got so removed from the means of production we didn't actually know how anything was created anymore. That's where we are right now. Is that we are so far removed that we don't understand what has gone, what kind of soil is being used, what kind of feedstock is being used, what the pollution is doing to the people who live near the farms that we're getting our food from, what the communities are doing, how badly the people are being paid. We don't care. We're sitting right all the way down over there. We don't care what's going on at the top. It's really very disturbing. I was trying not to cry earlier. But what we really have to do is we just have to stop. This is supposed to be about these are conscious consumption. The problem with conscious consumption is consumption. We have to stop. We have to stop consuming. We have to start thinking about what it is that we need. When was the last time that you bought something that you needed? Not, I need sugar for a cake that I don't need to make. When was the last time you bought something that you actually needed? Think about that. We've stopped, in a society, we've stopped thinking about what we actually need. And then, not only do we not think about the things that we need, but we don't think about what the implications of buying that are. Not what waste I'm producing as a result of that, but who has suffered because of what I am buying now? Who has suffered? Has anybody gained other than the store that I've just, because they haven't benefited. They haven't benefited. Even Walmart has incredibly high retail revenue, but most of the money that they make is because of interest in the bank. But they're paying their people no money. They're not coining it. So even if you're buying at Walmart, you're not feeding the system. You're just contributing to exploitation. What we should be doing is putting our dollars sparingly, only buying what we need, into organizations that are doing good, where you know that they know that the food that they're buying, whatever it is going to people that actually deserve it, that are using it to the benefit of the communities, that people are not being exploited, that people are not being poisoned. How often do we even think that? We work with a lot of people, some of the people that we work for in government, and they say they can't afford to buy food from us because our food is more expensive, which it's not. But our food is more expensive, and that they're really going to do, what instead they're going to do is they're going to go to Safeway and buy it. I'm like, how does that make sense to you? Because the people at Safeway, the reason that it's cheaper is not because it's better, because nobody and nothing along that entire supply chain is benefiting. How is that okay? That's the government. It's our government. Our government is literally going and spending our dollars perpetuating exploitation across the entire supply chain. That horrifies me. So we should be stopped. We should not consume. That reduce thing should not be reduced. It should just be stop. Just stop and think, what am I buying? And what is the impact of the things that I am buying? And am I putting my money towards something that A, I need, and B, somebody else will benefit from? And if those conditions are met, first of all, you'll find out that you actually buy a hell of a lot less. You know, when we talk about zero-waste vegan people, because you can have vegans and they can do it for a whole bunch of reasons. You have zero-waste people and they do it for a whole bunch of reasons. But when you do zero-waste vegan people, they usually have this idea of just using less. Because our impact on the environment not only needs to be less, but it needs to be positive. You should be spending more money on organizations that are doing good. Not less, but then you should be spending no money on organizations that are shitty. Because if we're going to allow the companies that are doing good to do more over time, you have to put your money there, because money does not fall off trees. At the moment, putting our money in Walmart is making Sam Walton and his kids really happy, and everybody else is in pain. So if you're going to be a conscious and ethical consumer, you have to consume everything ethically, with ethics guiding every single one of your choices. And this really is something that we all need to take on. This is not something that somebody else is going to fix. I didn't use that thing that says I used to think that somebody should do something about that, and then I realized that I was somebody. We all wait for somebody else to do something, and it's really cool that there are people here who are doing stuff. That this is not about waiting for somebody else to do stuff. Unless every single one of us participates in this, we are all fundamentally screwed. That's it. We can't just substitute things that we have for better things. We have to get rid of the things that we don't need, seriously. This convenience thing, I don't understand, honestly. I teach marketing and people go like, convenience, I'm like, explain that to me. What does that word mean? I don't understand. And they go, convenience means that it's easy. I don't understand, because people go out of their way. I've seen people wake up in the morning, drive for 10 minutes to Starbucks, wait in the queue for 7 minutes, get their coffee, drive 7 minutes back, and then drink it. So that's like 34 minutes or something absurd to get a coffee that I go downstairs and I make myself in 5 minutes. So I don't understand this convenience thing. I really don't. It floors me. It makes no sense. Think about that every time. But I want to, and I think, I'm tired. I don't feel like making dinner. And then I have to think about getting in the car, going somewhere, waiting to be seated, then ordering for something, maybe 20 minutes later getting it. And then I'm thinking, screw that. I can make myself a sandwich. We think about this convenience, and all it is outsourcing the problem to somebody else. If we want to fix the planet, it's on us. In every single thing that we do, every day, all the time. There's nobody else. There's nobody else. And so, what we do at Loopy Cafe is we do some of that. At the moment, though, we've partnered with Spec, we've partnered with Master Recycler, which is part of Spec, and we're teaching what Brianne was talking about, the Master Recycler program, and Zero Waste Canada, who does the auditing for zero waste organizations. And we're trying to disrupt the food system. We're trying to teach this across schools, teaching people how to cook zero waste, how to think zero waste, how to buy zero waste. Because at the moment, if you want to learn to be a chef, you have to cook things that will kill you, heart attack. You have to know how to make pastry, even though it should have a warning label, will cause heart disease, but you have to do that. Have to require perfect fruit and perfect vegetables that require all sorts of problems with manufacturing and perfect production, which is very, very problematic. Anyway, we want to offer an alternative to that. We want to tell people that buying local, buying ugly, buying only what you need, teaching people the impact of the food that they cook. And then talking about packaging and distribution and how to buy only what you need and think about how to get people to come together, because food and all of our consumption should be community-based. So that's at the moment what we're doing, and we're hoping to roll it out from schools all the way up to organizations who are moving their organizations from being bad to sustainable to zero waste. And so we're going to be hopefully retraining people how to think about this across the food system. But we need to do some fundamental work. We need to change everything. And if any of you want to come and learn how to cook vegan, zero waste, and learn about all of these things and how everything works together and how you can make these choices and decisions every day, all the time, look us up. Thank you very much.
For giving us lots and lots to think about, and hopefully some ideas of our own. Do any of you have any question that you would like to ask the panel itself or one of the panelists? Because this is being recorded, we do ask that you use the mic.
I'm curious about the ugly food that you mentioned, so almost all of you. I'm curious if there is already a network to collect directly from the farms the ugly food, or how do you organize this collection, or if you know if are there data available about the amount of ugly food that is wasted or how it's managed?
I can take that, I guess. I don't actually know any statistics about it, but in our case, it's farmer to farmer. I think there's like one. I think the only one that's an actual product we buy from a distributor is the potatoes. But even then, the potatoes, I believe, are a whole bunch of farms that give all their ugly potatoes to this distributor who packages that up and then sells it as a product. But the rest of it is farm to farm. And then even for us, our ugly bananas are bananas that didn't make it into spud bins or had maybe a bruise or something along those lines. But I don't know of any networks that are sort of dealing with it, but I'm sure there is.
So I spend a lot of time thinking about this, about sustainability, and what I keep running into is this seemingly insuperable barrier of human psychology, especially where I'm from, the US, where people have internalized consumerism to such an extent that they've sort of confused it with their fundamental rights. So that there's been the occasional experiment, for example, in one municipality to the next to, for example, ban plastic bags, and even if that simply means they'll be replaced with paper bags, it provokes such indignation and vitriol even, and it just makes me wonder how we can ever possibly make progress on the issue. I guess to turn this into a question, what I keep asking myself, and I don't have an answer yet, is how do you pitch a lifestyle to the wider public that might make more sense viewed from just about every perspective, but is less convenient and therefore, from a certain viewpoint, from the prevailing viewpoint in the US, unmarketable? Thank you.
Yeah, I can talk about this just from my point of view with demoing. Market psychology typically is 13 touch points to sell a product. So you can't talk about something once and then expect anyone to listen. I think, being in the food business, you go through kind of peaks and valleys. Well, and being an entrepreneur, you go through peaks and valleys, right? The highs and lows, and you can go with these pessimistic points, and then you have very optimistic points where things are going well. And I think the idea, and what I'm trying to say, is that just keep talking, keep going to events, keep trying to educate as much as you can, and be patient. I think 66% of Canadians under the age of 23 eat plant-based. Okay, 2 decades ago that would have been 10%. So it is changing. There's waves coming. You're definitely on your own when it comes to the U.S. That's a whole different thing. Nice teasing.
Can I just add something? First of all, so there's what we call the product life cycle, and the product life cycle just mimics the introduction of all ideas across everything. It doesn't matter. Everything starts with a few innovators. We call them, it's less than 3%, and then it goes through the early adopters, and then more 10%. You get to the early majority and the late majority. You're never going to change. You're never going to introduce a new idea and for the majority of people to adopt it. It's just they will rebel. That's just how, it doesn't matter what it is, even if, as you say, if it's in their best interests, anything new will be rejected. For the simple reason is people don't like change, and everything is value laden. Everything that we do, we build up from a psychology perspective, we build up expertise and an understanding of how things work. And when you tell us that thing's changed, that thing has changed, psychologically we go, are you telling me that I'm wrong? Are you telling me that everything that I've done up to now is wrong? Are you telling me that I'm a stupid person? How dare you? Who the hell are you? And suddenly you're like, what? What the hell? What's going on? So don't try to talk to the majority. You talk to the innovators. You talk to the people who are there. It takes 10% of the population. That's it. For something new to take place and for something new to change. Just 10%. And you'll spend a lot of time arguing with people who have lots to say about why what you're doing is wrong. Find people who already get what you are talking about and work with them. And once you start talking to them and you talk to more of them, eventually you become a movement. And it's 10% for things to change. That's it. If you're waiting for somebody else to get the majority to change, nothing will ever change. You start, you put things, and things just take time. Things take time. Things just, the speed of innovation is years. You put something new out there, it takes 3 years for people to even know that you are there. 6 years for them to actually figure out that what you had to say was actually not that stupid. So you have to just do it. You have to do it again and again to the people that are on your side. And yeah, you're trying to change the red states, don't bother. Go and take the people, as Dylan was saying, sorry, not Dylan. Yeah, Dylan was saying, like in California and New York and even some places in Minnesota and stuff like that, who are, on the forefront of thinking, and you work with small people who want to make change, and small amounts of people, big people. But, it's not that crazy anymore. You've got the Green New Deal happening as a concept in a way that would never have been thought about even under Obama. If this had come under, and it was put forward, the Green New Deal was proposed under Obama and was completely ignored. So it's the right time now to start doing things, and keep talking. And the more people keep talking, the more it just becomes something we're saying.
Can I jump on that as well? Yeah, so just like Dylan was saying, I think ultimately when it comes down to it, education is such a key part of this conversation because people tend to protect and care about things that they're familiar with. So, I mean, from a community perspective, that's something that's really important to us, is just how can we expose the most number of people to what we're doing, kind of like the conversation around Safeway. Like, when you think about it, getting in front of as many people as possible is a really big part of that conversation, and just exposure and leading by example is something that tends to draw people in. I think a big part of it, like in the sustainability movement in general, though, ultimately comes down to conversation and empathy. Like, how can you bring someone into the conversation who, is in a red state, or like has never grown up this way, or hasn't been in a household growing up and cooking food? Like, how can you draw them into the conversation? And so I think that's a big part that business can play, is like, how do you facilitate those conversations with the large audience of customers that you already have? And I think the most important thing for us is that we found we really need to meet people where they're at. We need to make it accessible. We need to not be perfect. We need to accept anyone that's walking in the door and make it easy for them. And yeah, kind of those things in combination tend to really help and inspire a lot of people to talk about what they're learning and bring people on their journey and spark those conversations that ripple out from your grocery bag or your kitchen table. Yeah.
I wanted to touch on, like everyone in this room, we all care about sustainability and make choices or could do better in the way we live, but it's also, we are in the 1%, or we have the choice to do so, or at least I'm assuming people in this room have the choice to do so, where the majority of the world, even if they want to act in a more environmental way, don't have the choice due to time constraints in their day or financially. So I was wondering if you could speak on how we, of people who have choice to live more sustainable lives, can impact those that desire to but don't have the time or the money to do so.
Sorry, but that's not at all true. Like, the people who make the most waste and consume the most and spend the most on the most ridiculous things are the people with money. The people who would have no money buy very carefully. And they don't buy stuff that they don't need. They will spend more on a suit or a jacket when they know it will last many years than people who shop at H&M and go in every week for a new fashion. So it's a misconception to think that the people we need to change are the less fortunate. It's the ones with the most fortune, literally, that think that they are able to demonstrate their wealth by buying as much and having their Starbucks brand or having the most recent fashion item or whatever. It's unfortunately not the people who who need our help, who are to make better choices. The people who need our help because we're exploiting them through the consumption practices that we're perpetuating. So the people who have very little to eat have very little to eat because we're exploiting them in the factory so that we can go and buy stuff at H&M. So stop buying at H&M.
Did she answer? Did she understand your question?
People that like don't have food on their plates and they consume very less or very little. But there's a majority of people in Canada and the US that, work 3 jobs, have 5 kids, and they go to Walmart because that's what they can afford and that's what they have time for. So how do we support people that are there to...
Well, again, those are through our better choices. So they work in places that are the places that are available. So if we spent more money at the places that were doing more stuff, those people could employ more of those people so that they would have more wages to spend on better stuff. So the way that you can support them is by taking your money away from Walmart. Because if more organizations like this are supported, then there are more places for those people to go and work in that they are not exploited. But there, again, those people have no choice because of the choices that we keep making. I've been spending a lot of my time in the developed world, and I think the developing world, and I think that it's just such a crazy name. Dylan was talking about Cambodia, and I've been spending a lot of time in Indonesia. Like the things that work there don't need waste, they don't need consumption. There are people and community based. It's just so much. Like they don't spend time and money on getting things that make them appear bigger in society. And so we just need to spend more time supporting each other. And then if we spend more time supporting each other, then that revenue goes into the jobs that will support those people and enable them to get better jobs. It's really on us. It's on the people who have the capacity to go and put money in the organizations that are doing good. It's on us.
Thank you.
Hi. Hello. Is this okay? Okay. Just following up from what she said, and he also was talking about in terms of like human psychology in general, and also people. I know this panel is very Vancouver based, and probably cities that are similar to Vancouver. I'm just curious to what your thoughts would be on scales of cities that honestly do not give a shit about like these kinds of things. Like I grew up in Bangladesh and Thailand, 2 countries that really don't, like that's not even in their forefronts, unfortunately. And people who even have the power don't have the power. They just waste so much on the streets that they're so desensitized to it that they're just like, why do I care about this when even the government isn't doing anything about it? So I'm curious to I know that there is power in the people and things like that, but when there are institutions that exist that really don't support that kind of change, fortunately, like how Vancouver does, unfortunately that doesn't exist in there. What kind of change would you kind of think, or would you advocate for those kinds of economies?
I think one thing, like we have recently started exporting a fair amount to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is one of the richest places in the world, of course. But the road to the reason we're exporting to Hong Kong is the road to mainland China. Mainland China is a very interesting place. It's some of the richest places in the world, some of the poorest, some of the most populated places, some of the least. So I can't really speak to Bangladesh, but speaking to that route, it's what we found is this idea of like influencer marketing. There's a thing trending right now. It's called trash tag. I'm sure most people have seen it. It's the idea that going to pick up garbage in a public place for no money is cool. We need more stuff like that. There needs to be people, everyday people stop following the people who sell lipstick and selling, booze, or demand that those people do more time with them. Like everyone loves Ryan Reynolds, right? Mr. Vancouver, but he never puts up anything about environmentalism or sustainability or trash reduction. If he did, that one person, there'd be thousands out the next day picking up trash. It's that idea that those types of people with power, especially in this age of social media marketing, or viral marketing, they have more power than emperors had in the past, right? I think it was was listening to Kevin Hart the other day. He has a really interesting, I think it was on Joe Rogan podcast actually. He was talking about this financial literacy course he's doing for free, and with like kids who grew up in urban environments, shitty cities all over the U.S. and Canada. And it's like that guy has like 50 million followers. Like no Roman emperor had that many. So getting those people, how do you do that? I don't know. I'll admit it, but I think that's the only way. I just don't see places like those cities changing. There's no economic reason to. They don't recycle because no one's paying them to. But yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you.
I just had a question with, I forgot, no. Okay, so you guys touched upon like how everyone's talking about like choices, and yeah, we live in Vancouver, and so we have the option to go to grocery stores that are zero waste focused, and like other places would not always have that. And you kind of mentioned like a call to ask or like action to demand businesses to do that. Are there some other like call to actions or asks that you like recommend us to do or like take? I mean, other than like talking or asking influencers to change or asking businesses to change, is there anything else that we can do other than just like trying our own little actions? And like obviously we cannot all go and start a business as well, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll start on that one. I guess the whole conversation around things like influencer marketing and education and teaching people about these issues, it's so important to vote with your dollar, but it's also so important to vote. So I think that's where a lot of individual people can have a ginormous impact, right? If you're a large group of people that really care about something and you use your voice to vote, it's just this like, this big circle where if there's a large enough demand on the consumer side of things, you can get businesses to shift, but you can also get governments to shift. And I think that's where you'll get changes with places like that, when you have enough people on board with these things. And yeah, we're just really passionate about protecting a certain thing or pushing a certain movement, you get that policy change as well. So it's like a bit of push and pull from both directions, and it definitely like starts at the consumer side of things as well. And I think to do that as an individual, but also as an organization, we really do need to focus on those hope spots. We need to focus on the positive things that are working. We need to inspire people to change, and the only way to do that is to, be hopeful and, realize that there is something we can do. And if lots of people do small things, they really do add up, and I think that's a good place to start.
I think too, just to build on that idea of voting, is get involved in local government. I know it's like such a ridiculous, like and you will get, if you've ever seen the show Community, you'll get nights, like crazy nights in local government, but you can, if people get involved in local government or like nonprofit societies and small communities, like I sit on the board of a environmental organization, we do a lot of good, like a lot. And it's amazing. You have, you can get city grants, or you have a voice, you can talk to city councilors. Where I'm from, New Westminster, they just implemented a whole new green plan, and they had planned to do it in like 2028, and they were like, no, we're doing it in 2019, because it needs to set that's the lens to set every decision we make from now on, rather than that leading to those decisions. So that was just from people like that. The government did that because enough people came to every city council meeting just saying, like, we got to do this. Like, we have to make these changes. So that's that, and it's really easy, and sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's not, but sometimes it is.
Well, folks, I want to thank each of you again on the panel, and you've given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure this is true for others as well. And thank all of you for coming out. It's Monday night, right? It's Monday night, and you came to a wonderful panel. Thanks for coming.